What's going on, guys? Today I'm going to show you guys how to replace a leaking axle seal in your Jeep Wrangler. Okay, so to get to the axle seal on this thing, obviously brakes got to come off, wheel bearing has to come off, we have to pull the axle out, and the axle seal on this thing is actually in by the differential. So we're also going to have to remove the differential carrier on this thing. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to get all the brakes disassembled, get the wheel bearing taken off. All right, so I'm going to remove the caliper, but before I do, I'm going to stick a screwdriver in here and just pry on the piston a little bit on the caliper. Push the piston back a little bit so this caliper will come off. You have two 13mm bolts holding the caliper on. Pull the caliper, hook over here. We're going to set this off to the side. So ultimately we're going to have to unplug the ABS wire from the frame. So you're going to have to get all this wiring loose up here for the ABS as well. So continue pulling this wheel speed sensor wiring. You know, you're going to have to get all this stuff out of these brackets anyway, and it's going to help me get the impact in here. So that's going to come out of there. Set that off to the side. Get the impact 21mm socket. So I can get this in here. Pull that off. Now we can get the rotor taken off. So the brakes on this Jeep have never been apart. They still have the retaining clips on the rotor that they put on at the factory. So I'm gonna have to dig these retaining clips off real quick. After that, we can get the rotor off. Hopefully it comes off without too much of a problem. So before we start working on the wheel bearing, next thing we have to do is deal with the wheel speed sensor wiring. So as rusty as this Jeep is, I know that if I try to take the wheel speed sensor out of the wheel bearing, 9 times out of 10 I'm going to break it, being that it's this rusty. So my only other alternative is to unplug it from up here back behind the shock, pull all the wiring down through, undo all these clips, and pull the wheel speed sensor with the wheel bearing. So there's going to be 3 bolts holding in the wheel bearing here. So there's a bolt here. There's another one up here, and there's going to be one just like this one on the back side over here where you guys can't see. So they're 13mm 12 point, and as you can see, this is a 2014 Wrangler, and I'm pretty sure it came out of Canada because everything inside is written in Celsius. So lives in Ohio, came from Canada. It's had nothing but rust its entire life. So if yours are rusty like mine, it may be interesting getting these bolts out, because these 12-point bolts really like to strip. It's pretty much mandatory. You got to pound these sockets on here with a hammer to get them, make sure they're seated fully. The other thing is I would not use an impact on this. Use a ratchet, just because it's a lot easier to feel when it's going to strip and basically how it feels coming apart, whereas you just put an impact on it and zip it, there's a higher likelihood that you're just going to round this thing off completely, and then you got a world of pain. think it slipped. Got him. See what I was saying there, guys? I didn't have that socket all the way on there, and as you saw, when I went to turn it the first time, it definitely slipped. Hit it again, and it went on further. I need some PB Blaster on this thing. Okay, now at this point, you can pull the wheel bearing and the axle as one piece if you leave this 36mm nut on. So in my case, I'm going to be replacing the U-joints on the axle shaft. So I'm going to separate the bearing from the shaft because, like I said, I got to replace a U-joint, and that's virtually impossible with it attached to a wheel bearing. So I'm going to go ahead and take this off again. If you get a pry bar back here, you could probably pop both of them out in one piece, meaning the axle and the wheel bearing, one assembly, and pull it right out. When you pull the axle out, guys, you may have a couple of these like plastic rings that come out. What these are is Chrysler puts these over top of the axle at the factory, so when they go to put the axle in the tube, it aligns with the differential a lot easier. So if you can see them in the tube, obviously pull them out and then put them on the axle when you go putting everything back together. It'll make it a lot easier to reassemble. So now that I have this apart, I'm going to come in here with a pick, clean all this crap out of here, clean this whole area up so it doesn't look like there was a massive leak here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick off camera, and then we're going to start pulling the differential apart on this thing. Now at this point, we got the axles out, everything's cleaned up. Next thing we got to go into is the differential. So you're going to undo the fill plug. So once you get the fill loose, go ahead and loosen the drain. You gotta drain the fluid. Oh good, there's still oil in it. That's always a plus. While that's draining, go ahead and start getting this cover taken off. Here. Once you get all the bolts out, with the exception of the top one, get your prying device of choice and pop the cover off. Okay, so real quick, before you can pull the differential carrier and all that stuff out, you have to disassemble the other side as well. You know, obviously I didn't show that on camera because it's literally the exact same as what I just showed you. So for the sake of time, I'm not including it, but it's literally a mirror image of what I just showed you over there. So you have to pull both axles out and then undo the 4 bolts, and then the ring gear and the carrier, the differential carrier, will all come out as one piece. Now, this is a Rubicon Jeep, so it has a front locker. The front locker, I have to go in here and disconnect, obviously, before I go pull the ring and pinion out of here. Obviously, if you guys, depending on whether or not you have a Rubicon, you may or may not have to do that. So if you guys take a look right here, this is the plug for the front locker. It's held in with an 8mm bolt. So I have to get this 8mm bolt out and then basically unplug this, pry up on it, and get this up out of the housing. On the bottom side of this piece that I'm showing you right here, there's going to be a plug. Now, this plug is what connects the locking differential electrically to the outside of the vehicle. So obviously I have to disconnect the wiring before I can go pull the the differential assembly out of the vehicle. So remove the 8mm bolt, get this up out of the way, unplug it, and we start removing the ring and differential. All right, guys, so as you can see, I've got the locker plug up out of the differential. It was kind of a pain in the butt, especially when they're this rusty. So this is how I did it. Get a ton of penetrating oil, hit it with penetrating oil, and start turning it left to right, break it free. Once it's like you're able to turn it, what I did was I came in underneath here on this this bearing cap right here, and I got a little screwdriver in here and basically pushed up on the bottom of it. And it took a little bit of doing, but as you can see, it did pop up out of the housing. If I just tried to pry on the top of this thing, you can see I broke that corner off of it. It's still going to be sealed, it's going to be fine, but yeah, don't try and pry it from the top. You got to get a little screwdriver or something down in here from the bottom, push up on it. That's the only way it's going to come out of there.
Did you guys hear that little snap? That was the connector. I broke it trying to get it apart. It is extremely brittle.
Next thing we got to do, remove the bearing caps. So guys, when you take this stuff apart, make sure this bearing cap ends up back on this side. Make sure you mark the top is the top. The other thing that you're going to have in here, you're probably going to have some shims on both sides. What these shims do is they set the, in case you aren't aware, what they do is they basically move this ring gear left to right, and they control how it meshes with that pinion gear back in the back that you guys will see in a second. So the shims are critical, so keep track of them. Otherwise you're going to have all sorts of gear noise when you put this thing back together because these gears won't mesh right. Hopefully we should be able to wiggle this ring gear and differential out of here without taking this steering apart.
So snaking this ring gear differential out of this housing, it's going to take some time. As you can see, I'm in here with a pry bar, obviously gingerly prying just to get the thing to move. It was, even after you take the caps off, it's actually stuck in there pretty good. Like I said, you're probably going to need a pry bar or something to, pop it loose and get it free. As you guys will see, I tried a couple different ways of getting this thing out of here, and I ended up taking it out over top of the tie rod ends. There's no way it's going to go underneath that bar.
So at this point, if you guys take a look, we're ready to remove the seals. How I'm going to do this is I have a 3-foot pry bar stuck in the end of the axle tube. So I'm going to hammer on the end of that and just basically pop out this axle seal. So you're going to have to do that to both sides. Okay, so I got to cut in here for a second because I forgot to hit record while I was doing this. You guys have to clean out the axle tubes. To do that, I just wrapped a rag around the end of a pry bar and just pushed it down the axle tube, hosed the whole thing out with brake clean, pushed everything toward the center section, and then obviously cleaned all the gunk out of the center of the axle, or out of the differential assembly. So with that, make sure you clean out the axle tubes. All right, now let's install the seals. Okay, now at this point, as you guys can see, we're ready to put in our seal. Now the seal, I put a little bit of RTV around the outside that's going to press in. The side with the spring on it, if you guys look in there, the spring is going to go toward the differential, or toward the inside of the vehicle. So we're going to get that started just like that. And I'm going to use a special tool to push this thing in. So this is the special tool. I'll link it down in the description for you guys if you guys want to buy one. It's just going to make this procedure a lot easier to take care of. So the way this thing works is it basically fits inside the seal, and then you just tighten this nut, and that's just going to push the seal into place. And there, it's getting tight. So I back it off, and that seal is fully installed. So now, obviously, to do the other side, you're going to flip the tool around the other way, and obviously go from the other side. So this special tool has a pocket in it. You can see it has that lip on it that actually fits in around the rubber part of the seal, and basically keeps you from tearing the seal up.
Now once you have your seals back in place, you can go ahead and put the ring gear and the differential back in place. When you guys put this back in, you have to have the shims, the bearings, and everything basically all in one assembly, and you have to push the one assembly into the axle housing. Like if you try to push the differential in first and then put the shims in after, they'll never go in. You have to put everything together and then slide it all into the housing. Kind of makes it a pain in the butt, but just take your time and it's doable.
So as you guys can see, I got the ring gear and the differential all bolted back in. I haven't torqued the bearing caps yet. This one's a Dana 44. They go to 80 foot-pounds. Some of the smaller Dana 30 stuff, I think that some of those go to like 60. Again, it's just going to depend on what kind of vehicle you're dealing with here, or what axle you're dealing with, I should say. Next thing is going to be this plug up on top of the axle for the axle locker. Like I said, some of you guys may not have this. Remember that big deal that I made about being real careful with this thing? I got it up out of the housing, went to unplug the other end, and broke it. So I broke the little clip off. I had to buy a new one. I'll put a link in the description for the OE Chrysler plug if you guys need one. Make sure that wiring's clear, that ring gear obviously. Make sure that's routed all right, and get some sealant on the cover and stick the cover back on. Take your cover, complete with RTV, and stick that thing in place. Hopefully you get the bolts somewhat lined up without smearing that RTV all over the place. All right, guys, going back together, make sure this area that the seal rides on is nice and clean. You know, there's no big burrs or gouges or any of that sort of stuff in it. And then these plastic rings actually go on the axle, and they basically just help you install it. They put these in here from the factory, so you can just, you know, slide the axle in and it's no big deal. So I'm putting these back on here. And then go ahead and slide in the axle. There you go. So now we can reinstall the wheel bearing. So as you're putting this this wheel bearing back on here, make sure you're paying attention to the dust shield. Make sure you got the dust shield in the right orientation, and you don't have it, you know, essentially backwards. So it's supposed to be kicked out away from the rotor, not kicked in toward the rotor. All right, so that's what I have for this video, guys. As always, I'll have links in the description to the parts, the tools, specifically, you know, the press tool that I use to push those seals in, and any other supplies you would need to basically, you know, do this job. One other thing real quick, guys, is, you know, thank you. The channel, you know, continues to grow at, quite frankly, a stupid rate. I never expected this channel to be what it is, and I have you guys to thank for that. So thank you for all the likes, shares, subscribes, the comments, the emails, all that stuff. I truly appreciate it. As always, guys, thanks for watching. And if you want to see more content, go down and hit subscribe. Thanks for watching, guys.